Snyder.
Chapter 24. Blood. Sebastian Simmons. Upstate Massachusetts. 2018. I don't know how to explain what I was feeling in any other way than to say that my heart hurt and my soul ached. Even after I stepped inside our home and locked the door behind me, leaving my son, Archer, God knows where in the middle of hell breaking loose, I continued to hold the doorknob, second-guessing whether or not I could abandon him out there. But as my wife Anna moved quickly around the living room to try and care for our twin girls, Sarah and Susie, I quickly forced myself to pull my attention away from the door and try to focus on what had to be done here and now. Anna had already managed to lie Sarah down after she had collapsed by the car, feeling so ill and looking so pale that I barely recognized her. And while her sister Susie sat by her side, clutching her stomach and moaning in agony, at least she'd been able to stay standing long enough to make it back into the house before I cleared the surrounding fields of the wandering undead. Only now that I was back inside and the sounds of gunfire had faded from the air, I could see that my wife and my two girls weren't just traumatized by what they'd seen driving into the city earlier that day. They were afraid of the way I had been acting since the moment they got back. My eyes met Anna's as she looked up from our daughter, pulling her hand away from Susie's hot and sweaty forehead and clenching her jaw in frustration. I had never lied to my wife, and had never kept anything from her, or at least almost never, both the existence of the virus and my paranoia surrounding it being the only exceptions. But those were parts of myself that I had always kept hidden and secret, parts of me that had been buried even deeper after my relationship with my brother and former best friend Derek came to an abrupt end. Of course, I'd tried telling myself that the infection wouldn't happen, that we'd been stupid kids for believing in it for as long as we did. And now, it seemed like a lifetime ago. Nevertheless, looking into the furious and fearful eyes of my wife, I couldn't help but feel guilty for keeping the truth from her. Anna stepped away from the side of the couch and stomped over to me, momentarily leaving Sarah and Susie to confront me in what I'd done. "Now you listen to me," she snarled, snatching the rifle off of my shoulder before I could even react to try and stop her. "What the girls and I just saw, what we just went through, is going to haunt us for the rest of our lives. But what I can't have is them thinking that their father is no different than everyone else out there who lost their minds today. What I can't have is you acting like you've lost your damn mind, barking orders like some kind of Nazi out of hell, when we're lucky to even have made it back home in the first place," she raged, keeping her voice just low enough that the girls couldn't hear her, and just threatening enough so that I'd understand she meant business. "Shame on you for everything you just said and did out there. And may God have mercy on your soul, because I won't," she finished, throwing my rifle across the room and storming back to the agonizing call of Susie, writhing in pain on the couch as her sister sat beside her, barely looking any better. I stood stunned for a moment, knowing full well how strong my wife was, but having never experienced the full brunt of how furious she could get. Even Elvis, our old hound dog, had moved to the other side of the house, afraid of Anna's tone. Unfortunately, I didn't have the option of backing down and admitting that in some ways she was right. Only I knew what was really happening, and only I knew what had to be done to try and save our family from it. "The people out there haven't lost their minds, Anna. They've been infected," I stated, following behind my wife as she returned to our daughter's side while doing her best to try and ignore me. "It's a disease that gets into the bloodstream, then makes its way to the brain. And when it does, it kills the person that's been infected and reanimates their corpse," I tried to explain, eventually able to get my wife to turn and look at me again, even more disgusted and confused than she had been before. "What in the hell are you talking about?" "It's a disease, Anna, and what's happening now is an outbreak," I continued, watching in frustration as she shook her head in denial and turned her back on me once more. "You have to listen to me. This isn't as simple as how you're feeling or what you saw, and it's not over with either. Those things will come here for us, and when they do, we all need to be ready for them." "Shut up!" Anna screamed, turning around and shoving me hard in the chest. Distraught, panicked tears streamed down her cheeks. Not only are the girls ill, they're on the verge of going into shock, and the last thing they need to hear right now is their father's horror story delusions. They're not delusions, I shouted, momentarily making eye contact with Susie, who still sat hunched over in a nearby chair, clenching her stomach and listening fearfully to our dispute. And I'm sorry, but there isn't enough time to sugarcoat this for you or the girls. The infected will be coming for us, and I need to know that when they do, you'll listen to me, I exclaimed, taking a step closer to Anna to try and plead with her. She shook her head and raised her hands in defense of my attempts to reach out for her, unable to grasp or accept what was happening. No, no, she shouted, slapping my hands away. Listen to yourself. If those people were sick, then you should have tried to help them. You were supposed to do everything you could for them, but you weren't supposed to. You shouldn't have, she tried to say, beginning to weep as she thought about what I had done, what I had to do, firing around into the brains of every undead within walking distance of our home. How could you, Seb? What you're saying isn't possible. Don't you understand that? Anna, nothing seems possible until it happens. But it is happening. Right now, I stated, lowering my voice and managing to step closer to her without being pushed away. Please listen to me, Anna. You have to listen to me, I pleaded, placing my hand softly on the sides of her shoulders and praying that she would be able to accept something that she couldn't believe. Suddenly, Susie released a piercing shriek that pulled Anna and I away from our dispute, rearing our heads to the side to see Sarah, who had been lying ill on the couch, now sitting upright, her head drooping forward and her long hair covering her face. But from where Susie was sitting, she could see something about her sister's expression that we couldn't, and it terrified her. She released another scream just as shrill and deafening as the last, only to lure Elvis from across the room towards her. But once he arrived, crawling forward with the hairs on his back standing on end, he began growling and barking viciously at Sarah, as if she were a burglar or mailman. And then, before Anna could reach our daughter's side to investigate what was the matter, I heard the familiar sound of a guttural moan come from Sarah's mouth. My jaw dropped and my world collapsed, hearing the same moan that I had heard from the ghouls I'd shot dead just moments before, hearing the same goddamn plague enter my home and take my little girl away. I stood stunned and devastated for that moment as Elvis barked and Susie screamed, watching Anna touch our daughter's shoulder only to have her hand latched onto and pulled down toward Sarah's mouth. Don't, I screamed, running forward to try and stop what was happening, but I couldn't move fast enough. Sarah had managed to pull Anna down towards her, opening her mouth wider and leaning in for the jugular. But fortunately, due to Sarah's small stature, Anna was able to pull back and break free, falling to the floor and allowing me the window of opportunity I needed to snatch my daughter and take her into the other room. What are you doing? Anna screamed, pushing herself off the ground as I barreled across the house towards the downstairs guest bedroom, carrying Sarah in my arms, just able to make it inside the door before Anna could reach us. I slammed the door behind me, dropped Sarah onto the bed, and quickly pulled a chair from the other side of the room over to keep Anna from breaking in. Sebastian! Sebastian! Anna screamed hysterically, pounding with all her might on the other side of the now barricaded door as I watched my sweet little girl slowly pull herself up off the bed and set her lifeless sights on me. I sucked in a tearful, heartbroken breath and, without even thinking about it, began looking around the room for something to use as a club. Her eyes were empty, and her tiny mouth drooped open, drooling onto the floor and moaning for flesh as her arms extended towards me. But even still, all I could see was my little girl. All I could do was pray that there was some way to bring her back, that I was sleeping and that this was all a nightmare. But with each slow step she took toward me, the pain boiling inside me grew more and more unbearable. My hand fell down onto a music box resting on the chest of drawers beside me. But when the thought forced its way into my head to use it to bludgeon Sarah, I couldn't even bring myself to pick it up. She stepped closer and closer to me until, just as she came within reach, All I could do was collapse to my knees and hug her, pulling her tightly towards me with both arms and digging one hand into her hair, squeezing tightly to keep her head still and stop her from sinking her teeth into my neck. I wept on her shoulder, sucking in devastated breaths that smelled of the tropical shampoo she had used. The touch of her cooling skin pressed against mine, and her chest remained still, neither rising or falling from breaths of air, or beating from the sound of her heart. She was dead. And not only that, she was infected. But as Anna's attempts to break into the room grew louder and more severe, I allowed myself to cherish the final moments with my daughter before I would have no choice but to set her free. I reached for the music box and raised it high above my head. A gunshot blew out the doorknob beside me, but fortunately was aimed towards the wall rather than into the room. Then, immediately afterwards, my wife thrust her shoulder into the now broken door and smashed it open, sliding the chair that I had barricaded it with away and pointing the rifle that she had snatched off my shoulder earlier directly at me. I froze, still clutching Sarah's hair with one hand, while the other remained over my head, ready to bring the music box down onto our daughter's head. But as I looked at the intensity and determination in Anna's eyes, I had no doubt that if I so much as moved a muscle, she wouldn't hesitate to kill me. "Let her go," Anna screamed, staring down the sights of the rifle at me, her hands shaking. "She's infected, Anna," I replied, as Sarah continued to moan and gnaw in the direction of my jugular. "Please listen to me. Let her go," Anna repeated, taking a step towards me and placing the barrel of the gun against the side of my head, deaf to any reason or rationale I might have for acting the way I was, for threatening our daughter. "I can't," I replied, trying to come up with any way that I could avoid being shot and keep my family from becoming infected. Because if I tried to subdue Sarah, Anna would shoot me and almost certainly become infected trying to care for our now undead daughter. While on the other hand, if I let Sarah go, she would most likely be able to bite me, infect me, and keep me from protecting my family from the coming onslaught. Unfortunately, those were my only options. Anna wouldn't listen to reason. Though our daughter was pale and behaving erratically, my wife would never be able to believe what was really happening without witnessing it for herself. I made up my mind and accepted the only chance that any of them would have to survive, recognizing the tremendous strength within my wife that I had fallen in love with years ago. I turned slowly and locked eyes with Anna, ready to say goodbye. "I won't let her infect you or Susie," I stated, tightening my grip on the music box. "And as much as I love all of you, if you won't believe me, I don't have any choice but to make you believe me." "I'm sorry, Anna. I should have told you years ago," I finished, choosing to release my grip of Sarah rather than bludgeon her with the music box, giving my daughter the freedom of movement she needed to lean forward, demonstrating once and for all to Anna that our little girl was gone by letting her sink her teeth into my neck. "Sarah, stop it!" Anna screamed, lowering the gun and lunging forward to try and pull her off me, utterly shocked and horrified by what was happening. But no matter how hard she pulled, Sarah wouldn't let go, gnawing deeper and deeper into my neck, infecting me as well. I clenched my teeth together and brought the music box I had been holding down onto the back of Sarah's head over and over again, eventually knocking her free as her body collapsed onto the floor, motionless, dead and free. Anna's hand covered her mouth, barely able to breathe as she leaned against the wall behind her, sliding to the floor in unspeakable disarray. The gun in her hand fell to the side of our daughter's body, and she stared in terror at the trickle of blood flowing down my shirt. I pressed my hand against the wound in my neck, trying to slow the bleeding long enough to speak to my wife, knowing full well that I didn't have much time to give her the instructions that she would need to survive. "Anna," I sputtered, blood pooling in my mouth as I spoke. "You have to listen to me," I continued, sliding my other hand into my pant pocket and removing my set of keys. "You need to get to the barn before the undead swarm the house," I continued, holding up a key wrapped in a black plastic tag, the key to the barn, and the biggest secret I had ever kept from my family. Under the tractor, you'll find a door, I explained, feeling a cold chill run through my blood, pooling in my brain and making it hard to think. Open the door, lock it behind you, and don't open it again. Don't ever open it again, I wheezed, each breath growing more and more difficult to take as I extended my good leg outward, trying to pull the rifle towards me with it. Anna stared through me, in complete shock. But I couldn't leave this world until I knew for certain that she had heard my words and understood what to do. I tossed her the set of keys in my hand and pulled the rifle off the ground, double-checking to see if there was any ammunition left in it. Anna, I stated once more, feeling the virus start to take hold. Anna, look at me, please, I begged, managing to draw her trembling stare away from Sarah's body to meet my eyes. Did you hear what I said? I asked, placing my finger on the trigger. She hesitated a moment before nodding in response, sliding away from the wall to try and come towards me, but when I raised my blood-stained hand, urging her not to come any closer, she stopped moving. I'm infected, Anna. Don't. Please don't, I gasped, taking quick, panicked breaths. Seb, Anna sobbed, looking down at Sarah once more. Please, she continued, glancing at the gun in my hand. I'm sorry, Anna. I love you, I choked, no longer able to breathe. I love you so much, I finished, realizing that if I didn't act now, I might not be able to stop myself from turning into a ghoul. I, swiveling the rifle in my hands around, closed my eyes, placed the barrel against the bottom of my chin, and pulled the trigger.